Hello and welcome to this discussion on European maritime trends, kindly sponsored by Trident Trust. Across the course of the next 60 minutes, we're going to bring you the latest trends from this sector with an expert panel of speakers. So looking forward to a great hour ahead. As always with PCD content, we love to hear from our audience. Let us know where you're watching from. Let us know any comments, thoughts, responses to what's being said as we move through the discussion. I will then, if you've got questions in the chat, I will bring our panelists on live to respond to them. So hope you find this session engaging and interactive. I'm going to come to our panelists now for a brief introduction before we get into the core of the discussion today. And first of all, I'm going to come to Jonathan Harris-Lowe, who's the head of marine services at Trident. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, David. Well, thank you for affording me this opportunity to join such a fantastic panel of experts today, and of course our opportunity to sponsor the event with PCD. For the benefit of our audience, I suppose, in addition to the broad range of marine services that will be relevant to today's discussion, Trident has for more than 40 years provided our clients with trust and fund administration, now across more than 20 jurisdictions worldwide. Anyway, that's it in short version. So I hope today's event proves to be insightful and interesting for everyone involved, and thank you. Perfect, thank you, Jonathan.
Just coming to the rest of our panel, we've got Dom Bulfin, Director at Bargate Murray. Welcome, Dom.
Hi, David. Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity. So yeah, I'm Dom Bulfin. I'm a director at the luxury asset law firm Bargate Murray. So many of you will be familiar with our work with superyacht owners, typically working with them from sort of inception to the end of their time with their yachts.
Terrific. And we've got Marianne Danissen from Camper and Nicholson. Welcome, Marianne.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me on this panel. We hope to make it as interesting as possible. As you probably most know, Camper Nicholsons offers a variety of services, but basically I look after the yacht management side of the group. So we tailor our services to what the owners need and want during the happy ownership of a yacht.
Fantastic.
Hopefully happy.
Fantastic, absolutely, absolutely. Dan Armstrong, last but not least, Dan Armstrong from Credentials. Great to have you with us, Dan.
Thank you, David. Yes, hi, I'm Dan Armstrong. My background, I used to work on super yachts myself, then came ashore and worked for a trust company where I sort of worked my way up the ranks to become head of crew services and yacht technical, looking after the assets we had. I left there recently. We've now set up Credentials as a software company. We're tackling a couple of problems, but we're helping crew with their digital wallets stay organised throughout their career and showing who they want to sort of connect up with. And we're helping businesses, family offices and independent vessels by trying to automate the compliance side, data protection and the onboarding side as well.
Fantastic, great to have you with us. So just to come into the discussion, I mean, we're going to look at the macro trends across the industry through this discussion, but a real live issue that has cropped up while we've been planning this session is obviously the tragic events that have been unfolding in Ukraine and Russia, having a broader impact on all parts of the economy and people's lives. So what we're trying to tease out, I suppose, though, is for the professionals on this call, what kind of impact are people seeing in their daily work? What's coming across their desk? What challenges are there? I mean, Dom, the situation's unfolding very rapidly. It's complex. What is it that you're picking up at the moment, and what are your conversations with clients and contacts in this area at the moment?
Yeah, it's been, you know, I think the one thing to mention is it's a very big shift for Russian clients. The super industry is not overwhelmed by Russia clients in that sense, so the world carries on for most of our clients, and we have to keep on ensuring that that's the case for them. But absolutely, where we're dealing with ultimately Russian-owned assets, it's been a big shake-up. You know, sanctions have been around for years. In England, for those who I'm not sure where our audience is from, it's the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Act is what implements sanctions in the UK, and we have lists of designated individuals, entities, and various sanctions that can be implemented against them. And so we're used to dealing with that as a law firm, other regulated professionals. We're used to, throughout our KYC checks, looking to see whether this is an issue. Are we about to work with someone that might cause us to breach the sanctions? And it's not an academic thing. You know, Bargate Murray not long ago declined to act for a client because we were not satisfied that the transaction was not tarnished by sanctions. That was before all the recent events. And I think what it's really done is just brought into sharper focus that this is real world. It is something that affects all of us, and increasingly, and I think the changes, including with the recent economic crime bill that's now act in the UK, is another element to it, which, if anything, stands a greater chance of impacting our day-to-day life. But the things we're seeing are, you know, we are now seeing clients struggling to insure their vessels. Clients who have relied on you know, standard P&I, sort of first-class P&I cover, are struggling to insure vessels at the moment, struggling to procure services in yards all over the world. It's not just limited to the EU. We're seeing service providers, I think, from a more protecting their own risk profile. I don't think that there's, I hope it's not so far as to go to say that there's a xenophobia kind of spreading, but there's certainly a bigger reservation, I think, now in the last few weeks, obviously, and people who I suppose don't want to enter into a contract that in another week's time or 2 weeks or a month's time is going to be impacted potentially by sanctions. And so it's a lot of troubleshooting. It's a lot of I mean, we're lucky that, I should add, we have not had any sanctioned clients yet. So everything I'm saying is purely Russian, ultimately beneficial owned vessels experiencing these issues. It's not, I'm not talking about sanctioned individuals here.
Okay, sure. And Jonathan, what's your perspective on this? What's been going on at Trident in respect to this area?
Well, thankfully, so far, our exposure has been extremely limited in scope. We don't have any clients who have been directly affected by, or whose assets have been affected by the sanctions. However, you know, with more than 15,000 employees under our current administration, as you would expect, we've seen employees who have been affected, either as a result of sending or receiving bank policies that have changed. So the immediate impact that we're seeing is that of delayed salary payments, or actually in some instances where salary payments can't be made at all because of those policy changes. So of course, looking for alternatives that are applicable in these changes, and as you mentioned earlier, things are changing very quickly and almost on a daily basis at the moment. So it's knowing what to do next. It's very reactive rather than being able to be proactive at the moment.
Thank you. Dan, have you seen anything on the crewing side similar to what Jonathan had reflected about payroll and difficulties there? Yeah,
I've been speaking to a number of clients and managers as well, and I think, like, echoing what Jonathan says there about the salaries, I think that's one of the biggest problems. Is trying to receive the money in from the family offices in Russia a lot of the time. So, you know, it's a big problem for crew, not necessarily from Russian or Ukrainian background, but European crew that work on these vessels. You know, with the money being seized, it's very difficult for them to get the wages through.
Okay, thank you. And Dom, I mean, it's a fast-moving picture. There's a lot of misinformation in the market, or professionals might just need that bit of extra insight. I mean, is this just where your network in the professional industry pays dividends because you can pick up the phone to people, or are there sources of information that you find you'd refer to help try and guide through on these difficult and fast-paced evolving changes?
I think a lot of it is actually at the moment, it's sort of applying what we and what everyone in the industry knows already, but it's kind of recalibrating ourselves, and it is talking to other stakeholders in the industry. I mean, I'm probably the top clicker at the moment on the UK sanctions list, and that is just to keep up to date with, you know, has there been an update? It's happening once, twice a day at the moment. So, you know, that's sort of in terms of just knowing whether or not you need to make a change or need to seek advice. I think that's certainly the main resource I've been looking at. This is just UK, of course. You know, we applied UN sanctions, but there's EU sanctions, US sanctions, and they are not always the same. We've seen individuals on one and then another. Some of them have been on US for a few weeks and haven't turned up on UK. So it's also not one size fits all, and that's where we've been leaning on our you know, our colleagues in different jurisdictions And that's where we've been surprised to find, other, lawyers in other jurisdictions now being reluctant to act again for non-sanctioned Russian, anything linked with a Russian at all. We're struggling actually to get that support we need. We're finding it, but it's not just as simple as it maybe was before, where you would just rely on your source of local advice. It's taken a bit more effort, and that's part, again, it's things are changing, but it's also that because companies are taking matters into their own hands a bit to ensure that, I think it's just easier to just say no than it is to navigate what it is you can and cannot do. And so that's been a bit difficult. But yeah, I think it's actually an important time to be, we will get, nowadays it's a WhatsApp, an email or whatever from, maybe it's a client rep, or it might just be a contact saying, have you seen this press release? Have you seen this article? And then it's sort of our job to go, yes, we have, but don't necessarily believe everything you're seeing, or yes, we have, but let us research it and actually find out first what's, before let's all panic, let's see, does this really apply? We were getting circulars sent to us left, right and centre earlier on in the conflict, less so now. I think things seem a little settled, although I think it's only 3 days ago, the UK sanctioned a huge swathe more individuals. I'm glad to say the list hasn't changed for the last 2 days, which I think is the first time since February that the list hasn't sort of changed every time I look at it. But yeah, I think it's a time to lean on the experience in the industry, lean on those around you. For us, yes, if we're advising, we go to source legislation, or we'll go to source the lists or whatever it might be. But often it's not actually it's not directly law. A lot of this, whether or not someone's sanctioned is a matter of law. But actually how that impacts and what one should do to deal with that is a much more sort of practical thing. And I think it just takes cooperation among everyone, coordination among everyone as well, to make sure that, when you get down to, what do we advise the yacht owner, what do we advise the captain or whoever it might be, it's not necessarily that us as lawyers are saying this is the law. It's actually us discussing with all the different stakeholders and trying to filter there's so much noise at the moment in the media everywhere, and it's trying to filter that down to something that also doesn't scare yacht managers away or make everyone just panic that it's all about to explode, when actually that hasn't happened yet. Yes, yacht owners have been sanctioned in the last few weeks, but we're talking, I don't know, you could probably count on your hands how many yachts are subject to asset freezes right now versus the fleet. And this is what I'm saying about it's a very visible problem, but it's quite a small problem as far as the fleet is concerned.
Okay, thanks. And I mean, Jonathan, is the value of the network there of trusted partners helps you battle through the misinformation that might be out there? Have you found, leaning on or discussing with professional contacts, the key way of actually managing your risk or understanding the scenario as it unfolds?
Absolutely. As Dom said, you can look at the list of sanctions, but that doesn't give you the answers. In many respects, it just gives you facts and figures. But within the industry, it's important to utilise contacts and reach out at all points in time. We very often find that we may have clients or scenarios in common, and learn from each other's knowledge and expertise. It certainly isn't something we can do on our own.
Okay, thank you. And just taking a step back and looking now at the bigger picture, looking at some of the buying trends, we're obviously emerging, or tentatively emerging, from the pandemic, which has completely disrupted many industries, changed many patterns of behaviour. And just in this next section, we're just going to look at how the pandemic has brought new customers into the marine market and what some of the tastes and patterns are there. So Marianne, just to bring you in, it'd be interesting to get your perspective on new buyers coming to the market and what they're looking for and how you're helping them.
I think that's actually a real question for the brokerage market and not exactly my field of expertise, as I'm more on the operational and day-to-day of yachts. But having said that, we would say that generally in the last year, since the pandemic, we've seen a huge trend of much younger clients coming into the market. And we're missing boats for sale. There's not enough boats anymore. They've all sold very rapidly. So there is there has been a high demand, and there has been a lot of sales in the last 6 months. So now we're missing boats. So if anyone has boats for sale, you can always come to us.
Has the demographic changed because it's owners making money in technology in certain sectors in large numbers that brings wealth to younger people, or what is it that you think has driven that?
I believe the pandemic has definitely made some areas and some industries richer in a faster way. Anything related to, pharmaceutical might have had, more opportunities, and people selling goods in terms of hospital needs, etc. So those people have suddenly had an increase of demand worldwide, and I think I've probably benefited from, more possibilities to be able to buy such assets. So I would say, yes, it's more than a sudden, and also everyone having been locked up, they all want to have a much more secure environment to go on holiday. Although the pandemic, we all think it's finished, but it's not finished yet, is it?
Absolutely. No, so part of the demand has been because of the style of break that people can have on these vessels. The sense of space becomes more important than it was before. Is that sort of stoked demand, is that people become aware of, and the leisure time becomes more precious?
I would say so. They've got a lot more demand of being on their own and more private and away from crowds. So for that, the yacht is ideal. In addition to that, you can also bring in the fact that maybe the yachts which are being built in the recent years are by far more sustainable. They're looking more at, how they look after the environment, and all that is definitely high on people's priority list. And we'll want to be more careful in how we consume. So that's also a trend which is pushing for more technology, better boats, cleaner seas. All that is now definitely pushing people.
Thank you. And Dom, have you noticed any trends in client demographic, people coming through, or is it still filtering through to your practice? Or are you noticing also this younger buyer trend?
No, certainly, and clients that we've spoken to that maybe it hasn't gone anywhere with, but nonetheless, it's been younger individuals who have sort of quite rapidly, I think, come into new wealth. If I was to sort of look at our average new client since the pandemic began, I would say it's probably a younger client and also a less sophisticated client in terms of having that wealth, using that wealth, which on the one hand makes it fantastically exciting. I mean, I'm building a rapid fleet with one new client, and he's from crypto money, and it's great fun. It's a really engaged owner who is just loving the fact that he's made an awful lot of money and wants to enjoy it. That said, there's a big element there, and I think that this is something that I think is really important. There's a huge responsibility on us and on anyone else who's the sort of first or second point of contact for these clients to ensure that they're doing the right thing and they're doing it the right way. So this particular client, I think he'd run before he could walk a little bit, and we've been, very keen to ensure that he establishes the level of sophistication in his operation that matches actually the fact he's got a pretty substantial fleet now of serious yachts, and it was a bit chicken and egg with him. He had the yachts without necessarily the sophisticated setup to make sure that he doesn't come into any trouble with those, and has, Marianne can talk better than I can, and Dan, about just if you've got a fleet, crewing it, and doing that the right way, and what have you. But certainly we're seeing, I would say, a younger client. I would say a more tech heavy, not just, this was a crypto example. And I have had people contact me saying, I know that you work with one crypto client, we've got this is brokers saying that we've got another guy who's made money that way. Are you au fait with doing transactions with a crypto element? So that's certainly a pattern for us, but we still very much rely on our traditional client is still absolutely key for us, and I think it's adapting and make sure we've got the right people in our business to service those different types of client and their different needs.
Great. And Jonathan, do you recognise this run before you can walk client that's not quite got the administration around the assets that they own or have acquired?
We are seeing more of it, absolutely. I think we're a little bit later to the party than the likes of Camper and Nicholsons or Bargate Murray, in that the point in time that we deal with the client the asset's already been purchased and the plan has already been made, we tend to, at that point, maybe get involved with the structuring, certainly with the crewing at a later point in time. But the ownership is a different type of demographic, younger, as Marianne said. With that, there are changes required to the type of crew that are placed on board. They still want the experience and the knowledge to support the operation on board, but they tend to want to have a younger member of their team to be on board. So yeah, there are some changes, although we're probably a little bit behind the curve in terms of seeing as many at the moment.
Dan, both Dom and Jonathan mentioned there's some of the challenges around crewing, and particularly with new owners, trying to make sure that vessels properly equipped. What's your perspective on how you help support these new owners and buyers?
Yeah, I suppose thinking from the crew side and some of the changes we've seen during the pandemic, things like actually crew changes when you need to get the crew back home again. What you have to do then about the isolation period, is it part of is it paid leave, neutral leave, or unpaid leave? And I think there have been problems there that the businesses have had to overcome. I don't think anyone was really prepared for this at all when it happened. So the first place you'd obviously go to would be the seafarer or crew employment agreement to have a look at the terms there. I think what we're finding now is people now starting to put in or build in these specific terms into the agreement. So crew, as they join in, they know exactly what is actually what they're entitled to if that situation does happen in the future. But I think it was a very, very difficult time. I think more Jonathan and Marianne could probably back me up on this, but it sounded like it was a pretty horrific time for you guys.
For the crew, it was definitely difficult.
Yeah, please. In terms of the risk new buyers face, I mean, are there certain risks that they really underestimate? I mean, what would be your shared experience around helping those with less experience navigate and learn how they should be running these vessels?
The new buyers, you mean?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean, what are the unexpected risks that a new buyer might face, and how do you help support them and make the experience more smooth?
If I may, I would say, based on the experience we have, because of the recent changes we've seen in the last couple of years, especially with the crew and their needs and how we all had to handle the difficulties due to the pandemic, I think that has also a knockdown effect on people's expectations while they're working on board. So we have to make sure as managers, and we are the ones basically talking with those owners, with those new owners, to make them aware that the needs of the crew have totally changed and shifted somehow. It's not that drastically changed, but they've evolved to a different vision than we had before. I would think the way the crew are looking at their jobs is not anymore the same, with the same eyes than before the pandemic. If you go to a ship and you think you're going to be stuck for 2 years, I'm not sure you want to take the job on. And some people have definitely suffered long period of times not being able to go home. And that has definitely given different vision for crew members to go and accept a job on a vessel. So I think the work conditions is something we make all the new buyers aware of, that these have definitely changed, and we need to adapt to what our younger generation wants, because they've seen and experienced something different. So it is now, I think, the turn for the more experienced to adapt to the ones who are coming into the market, and to still make it interesting and fun to join this industry, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. We just got a question from Grant Atkinson in the Isle of Man. Grant, thanks for your question. I think I'll put this to Dom first, but it's more on the transactional nature for new buyers. So has the pandemic led new buyers wanting to transact or move more quickly? Has it made them want to transact more quickly? And does this create additional risks and risks that might get overlooked? Who takes responsibility to ensure buyers take a breath and ensure they assess risk properly? So Dom, do you find that buyers wanting in a rush doesn't end well? And do you find that there's new buyers wanting to move quicker than they should?
Yeah, well, first of all, hi Grant, and I'll have a word with you later for such a long-winded question. But yeah, I mean, what I would say is the first example of this that we saw very early on in the pandemic, and this sort of touched on a lot of stuff that's been said in the last 5 minutes. Long-term charterer, now they're thinking, right, we want to have our own yacht. And we went through some really extensive discussions about perhaps buying one yacht from a particular yard. They wanted to have it extended, they wanted to have it remodeled. And there was about a month's worth of work went into this. I think they've never quite appreciated that yacht was not going to be available. I think this was August 2020. And I think they thought it might be available for winter 2020 for them to use. And I think that was a real eye-opener of sort of the sense of expectation and our duty to advise people who are looking to go into these things. When we said, the work you want, you're looking at 6 months or a year before you're ever using this yacht. And it was a real eye-opener to that particular owner or prospective owner. I don't believe they've become an owner yet, actually. But so that was an example of, can we do this? Yes, we know the yacht we want. We've had a chat with the yard. Can we get on with it? Get on the yacht in time for the winter season? And so that was one example. I think we're seeing various things. Yes, some of the recent transactions I've done, I've been at one point given a 2-week, we want to sign the MOA and have the yacht delivered in 2 weeks, which in my experience is pretty quick. It didn't go that quickly in the end because, as always happens, things crop up and arise. And I think we're seeing new entrants to the market on the professional side as well, that we're getting a different sense of, these are people who maybe have worked with clients in different sectors, different spheres, and have a different sense of expectation. And we're all sort of used to, well, this is what happens. You want to buy or build a yacht, you do an LOI, you spend 6 months negotiating the spec and blah, blah, blah. And, I'm working on a new build where the aim was to have its, MOA signed and a boat delivered in a couple of years now. And it's a big yacht, but whether or not that's going to be realistic, we don't know yet. But that's kind of, there's certainly a bit of a, I want it now culture, and that's everywhere. That's just the world nowadays. We get instant gratification from everything. And I think it's a bit unusual, particularly now. We're saying to people, look, if you want a new build from Fedship or Ocean Co or Lurson or whoever, don't book your flight for a few years. You're not going to have a new build from them if you decide today you want one. So we're seeing, it's almost, you don't want to be sort of playing parent, but to an extent it's sort of saying that I know you want it now, but let's manage the process properly so that you're not stung when you've got your thing. So.
Thanks, Dom. Marianne, are you seeing similar sort of impatience from characteristically, I suppose, from newer clients who want things now?
We see all sorts.
Yeah.
And I would say, like every yacht, every owner is unique, like all of us. Everyone has different aspirations, but you've got the owners which are impatient. And when you explain the reason why it can't be done, like Dom was rightly saying, they don't expect shipyard time to be that long when you want to adjust, an extra fit a different interior, or if you want to do an extension to the vessel, how long that might take in a shipyard. They don't realize what it all entails. They think it's done very quickly. But when you explain in detail, suddenly it's an eye-opener. So we have then those same buyers becoming by far more patient and understanding that it takes much longer than expected, and then still happy to enjoy their asset afterwards. At the end of the day, we need to ensure that they enjoy their yachts to the fullest.
Absolutely, thank you. We've got another question in from Anil Kumar, just picking up on the point that Marianne said about sustainability and interest in sustainability. I'm going to put this across the panel in a second, but just, are you seeing interest in hybrid super yachts, electric super yachts, mirroring trend in electric vehicles? Dan, are you seeing anything on the technology front that mirrors demand for sustainable options in the industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke to, I forgot the name of the manufacturer, but at the Monaco Yacht Show last year about hydrogen cells, about I think there's a tender that's got one installed as well, electric vessels as well. I think we're a long way off before it goes fully electric, fully sustainable in that type of regard. But I'd love to see changes happening there. And it's talk about diesel, electric engines have been around for a long time. So no, I personally, I think it's a long way off before we go see a fully electric yacht above maybe sort of 30, 40 meters. I think it's more realistic. We'll probably see sailing vessels that have got a lot of technology there. They can actually, again, I haven't got the technical names for this as well, but the prop shaft, they can turn that into a source to generate power to recharge the batteries, to then run the air conditioning. So there's a lot of, I think, opportunity within the sailing yacht sector. I'd like to see motor yachts hopefully follow suit eventually as well.
Thank you. I mean, Jonathan, in the private wealth sector generally, and within the trust and fiduciary sector, there's a lot of discourse about sustainability. And do you see that filtering through into this area as into the marine sector that is your specialism, or is it, as Dan says, we're a long way off yet, and there's some fringe options out there that are being developed? What would you say, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always on people's wish list to be more sustainable. The reality is the industry just is a very long way away from being able to provide that utopia and give everybody what they want in terms of renewables, etc. It's certainly not something we see a lot of in our area of relationship management, etc. But as I say, the thought is there. The intention is certainly very real.
Okay, Marianne, any thoughts or commentary around that and around the sustainable options, hybrid technology, different technology being implemented?
I would say, I mean, just to name a few shipyards, and I don't want to do that, but a lot of shipyards are now building a lot of diesel electrics, and it's always moving definitely forward in that direction. You won't buy a yacht, a new build with a standard engine that you used to have 20 years ago, unless it is a smaller vessel. But all the large vessels are now all going diesel electric, and I think it's already a step forward to the clients. It's the highest demand that the clients have at the moment. Fedship only builds diesel electric, as far as I'm aware. They don't do the old-fashioned way anymore.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got another question. The question's coming thick and fast, so thank you very much for your questions. Do pop them in the Q&A, and we'll bring them on live shortly. This one I'm going to take to Dan. It's from Simon Folks. Thanks, Simon. What's the panel's view on the impending skills shortage facing the industry? As exciting as it is to see the boom in construction, it's hard to see who is going to build them and crew them. Dan, I know this, and Marianne also, I'll bring you in a second on this, but what's your view on that? I mean, we've had on our agenda a big point talking on training and development, which is a critical area, but what would your response to Simon be?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, if I sort of look at it from the crew perspective, I know there's a huge shortage of seafarers in the merchant or commercial sector, and I know that's sort of I assume that's sort of happening in the yachting sector as well. And I think part of the problem is with the pandemic. The seafarers have been going back home, staying at home, and actually then sort of realizing they've got different jobs to do back at home. They can spend time with their family. So I think that's had a bit of a knock-on impact on the number of seafarers that are available. I think how can we change this and make it increase the number of seafarers globally? I think it's probably jumping ahead to another point Mike later on the panel. But I think part of the problem is that entry for seafarers to get into the maritime sector. How do they do it? And I think on the commercial, the merchant side, they have the internships or cadetships. You work your way through the ladder. It's quite a clear scale. But for the yachting sector, I think it's been in the news recently. It's just, I feel it's wrong, isn't it? I mean, most of the time, crew, if I speak to friends that want to get into the industry, the first thing I say is go to somewhere like Barcelona, on Antibes, walk the dock, go to bars to meet people. That's not a sustainable type of approach for people to get into the industry, and it sets the wrong impression from day one as well. So I think that needs to change. And I know we've all previously talked about the idea of internships or something like that, where you can actually get somebody to come on board the vessel, train them up. I think the problems we've got on the yachting side is we don't always have the accommodation on board these vessels to cater for green crew coming into the industry. But I think there does need to be a shift about how crew can learn to get into the industry, and I think that will hopefully help us for the long term as well.
Marianne, what's your perspective on that?
I think I've seen already quite a big shift from what it used to be to what it is now. Indeed, I mean, not everybody needs to go to the bar to get a job, because that would be giving the wrong image. It was probably very true 20 years ago, but nowadays people will try to find someone who can get them in. So you still have the know-how, or who is in the industry who can bring you in. But again, it's not something that I promote. I promote competency of people. How competent are you? If you've done your courses and if you have your competency, go and register with the right companies who are able to place you on different vessels. And Dan has pointed something so true. There is no cadetship in yachting, and it's something which is crucially missing. But again, we need to find out who would be able to pay for that. It's something that we need to encourage yacht owners, as much as they've invested in different, new technologies for the vessels. They also now need to think, and we need to encourage them to invest in people. How can we train them to come on board and be prepared for the work they're doing? On a small yacht, if you want to start and you've got no experience, if you only have 4 crew on board, it will be very difficult to have somebody, available to train the new persons. And the accommodation, there is no room for that person. And they won't have the time. If there is like guests on board, you still have to serve 10, 12 guests with 4 or 6 or 8 crew members. It's virtually impossible to do. For younger crew, I always encourage them to go on larger vessels and promote themselves and offer their CVs on yachts where you would have more people able, where you have rotation within the service. Let's say in the interior crew, if you have like a number of interior people who are shifting during the day, then you could possibly train somebody along the way. Again, you're very lucky when you are able to get on those yachts, because most of them would be then more privately used, where they will have time for youngsters. But on commercially used vessels, it's indeed a big problem. We all need to work at it together to give more room for our young seafarers.
Okay, thank you. We will return to this topic of training development, but there's a question which I'm going to put to Dom from David Gates in the Q&A. It's just asking, and obviously, Dom, this is a tricky area, but I think you can give us your reaction. As Russians are being frozen out of the market in terms of new builds, are these yachts going to be able to be sold, or are they going to be stuck in a legal limbo? Is there going to be a feeding frenzy of buyers looking to snap up these vessels as the situation clears? Is that a sensible question? Is there any sensible answer?
Look, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Whether there's such a thing as a sensible answer, I can't guarantee. But yeah, look, I've had phone calls from brokers saying, just so you know, I have people waiting in the wings for any of your clients' yachts that might need a quick sale. So, yes, that I think that swarm is probably swarming. People that have maybe been in the market for a yacht that they might think, great, I can get a bit of a discount. That said, we haven't seen, it's a difficult one because we haven't worked with any sanctioned clients to date. So it's a difficult one to actually say, here's on a nuts and bolts level, what happens. And it's also going to depend on where things are. And if it's a Dutch build, then it's going to be subject to the obviously EU sanctions and how they're implemented in the Netherlands. Whether the yard can get a Dutch, I think they called it a permit. We have licenses in the UK to allow us to, within certain parameters, work with sanctioned individuals, particularly on the legal side, but service sector, to avoid that cliff edge. For actually for the British in this instance companies, that's what we would look to do if a client was sanctioned. We would need to establish whether we can obtain a license, because you can't just turn off a super yacht like with a switch. You can't turn off a transaction just like that, like a switch. These things do, so it's going to be something that's going to be spelled out in those specific sanctions, and it's going to be one of these answers which really is, it's whatever the specific example is. I'm not going to go into sort of too many specific examples, but one that's all over the English media is Chelsea. There's an exemption within that particular sanctions event, which allows obviously the club, that is an exemption from the sanctions. The club can continue to operate, albeit with its 2 hands tied behind its back and its feet tied together. But so it's no one size fits all. When a sanction is imposed, it will say exactly what that entity or that designated person can and cannot do. And if it's not exempted within there, then there's the secondary side of, would a yard apply for an exemption? Our understanding is that the yards that we work with want to be as proactive as possible in continuing these builds, because frankly for them, having a halfway through built 100 and whatever meter yacht isn't necessarily an easy thing to find a buyer for overnight. There's a lot of rich people out there, but not that many people can just materialize a few €100 million out overnight. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but the answer is sort of there is no answer, but
Very respectable answer. No, thank you, and thank you for the question. I thought it was an interesting question. So, thank you for that, Dom. Dan, just coming to you, back to you, building on that, the training and development side and the discussion points around that. I mean, you're at the intersect between crewing and the technology side. Perhaps you could give us a sense of how technology is helping on some of these HR and crewing issues as well that we've discussed about, and particularly in the context of the pandemic.
Yes, thanks, David. I'd love to. I'll try not to ramble on too much because obviously technology is a passion of mine as well. But I think what we're seeing now is the use of, well, starting from very beginning. If you're looking at how hours of work and rest is managed at the moment, it's paper forms or electronic forms, which is almost like a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not really taking in individual perspectives about, one crew member maybe will work a little bit longer than another crew member. Another crew member might be more susceptible to fatigue as well. And that's when I think data, like having the data from crew members and actually analysing that can make a big difference. So the trend we're starting to see now is introducing wearables for crew. So they've got a device on the wrist that can measure their heart rate, let's say temperature, step count, things like that. And with the data you've then got, you can make a decision. I say you can, it'll be a system making a decision to work out the fatigue levels of the crew on board. So I know there's quite a few trials going on at the moment to see how accurate this particular method is. I'd like to see that happen in future. I do think it's a good approach to be using that type of data. I think on the second side, I was always sort of researching the latest trends and seeing what's happened. And I know that Apple and Google are also looking at the mental health side, particularly with, I've always thought this with Face ID. If you open your phone, it checks your face. So looking into really complex algorithms to look at the facial expressions, to read how you are, and picking up different things from those devices. So it might be interesting to see the likes of the use of smartphone just in your day-to-day. That may have a sort of a positive knock-on effect onto seafarers' mental health, let's see, as well. Hopefully.
Okay. I mean, Marianne, do you see a big role for technology here in this health and welfare space?
Absolutely. Like just in any other industry, technology is what makes us go forward. And I think if you're able to measure the level of fatigue of people, and I saw a question as well, I don't know if I should, as one which said, how can we make new owners see the benefit of employing many crew? Did you see that one, David, or was it just me seeing it?
There was a question which from Simon, which was about.
Oh, I see it on my panel for some strange. Anyway.
Okay. Well, talk to that question if you like.
Yeah, it's in the chat. It's about work-life balance.
Okay, great. Oh, excellent. Okay, great.
And to make sure that the crew contracts and working hours are reduced, and that's where Dan with his technology and those tools is definitely very helpful to give a point to measure. But also in addition to technology, I think rotation for the future will be also by far more spread out, just like it is in the cruise industry. So you would, if boats are being used more and more, you would still, I would imagine in 10 years from now that you would have crew coming on for 1 week, and then the next week you'll have another set of crew in order to make it all possible so that people don't get burned out. But again, that's me looking in the future. How right am I that the crystal ball will tell us? But I've got the feeling that most people won't be able to sustain this rhythm throughout a whole season anymore.
And I guess the technology could cut either way, in a sense of you're being monitored, which will make people feel it's the way it's implemented, isn't it, that will be the measure of success, whether people feel it's a positive, supportive thing or a onerous. Again,
it's got to be used. It's got to be used with caution, because you could have the opposite effect, and some people might fall through the technology path, and we might overlook something which is dramatic with one person. So again, with any new system, caution has to be applied at the start.
It is a delicate balance, isn't it, Dan, with people's data and information and how that's used, and the goal is to try and help people and get better performance, not to alienate people, I guess, and to, but it's a difficult balance to strike, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I've always believed technology should be used to sort of take away that sort of the pain points and automate the mundane sort of side of things, but it always needs a human element at the top. I don't think we can ever rely on technology alone as it is. I mean, as an example, like within credentials, we developed a system that can scan qualifications, recognize the qualification, it applies validity controls, things like that, which is really beneficial. And what we're finding now is we've got people helping us out putting qualifications in. We've got no maritime knowledge at all, but they're now getting trained up about all the different types of qualifications. But you're still always going to need a human putting that qualification in and learning from it as well. And so I do believe, yeah, technology should always be used in the right way to assist humans, but never to sort of take away those jobs. And that's another, I don't want to go off on the whole AI tangent, but I know people are so worried about AI coming in and taking jobs away. It comes into autonomous vessels as well, if that's going to deplete the need for seafarers. But I'd like to think technology is just there to support humans rather than actually take that role away from them.
But in just building on that, Dan, I mean, the risk of cyber attacks, I guess, and cyber threat in this area, as you say, with autonomous vessels, if there's pressure on crews, there's smaller numbers, then technology is a real risk factor here, is it? I mean, are you seeing developments in that field as to how to be more sophisticated around these highly valuable assets being protected against, technology threats?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that who knows what's happened to previous high-profile incidents on the merchant side over the last few years. But I do believe that the technology in the older vessels, the quite gaping holes there as well, which is quite open for cyber attacks to manipulate those particular systems and those vessels. But as we're using more technology, it's becoming so much more sophisticated and so much more difficult to penetrate and cause an attack there. So I do think using the latest technology, it is going to, eradicate, really reduce down the chance of those cyber attacks on vessels. But at the same time, it's making sure you've got the right people that are going to implement and install this equipment and also maintain it as well to reduce those chances happening.
Okay. I mean, Jonathan, what do you see from your side in the administration of structures where you're considering risks, new threats like cyber, that, to make sure they're properly managed?
Yeah, I mean, if we just use the crewing as an example, we're dealing with banking information and personal data on a daily basis, and it's all important that information is held as securely as possible. We'd love to automate the process as much as we possibly can to ensure that funds are being paid out to the right account at the right time, using the information that the crew members provided. At the moment, a lot of that process is manually managed, because there is always a concern and a fear that full automation of that is going to open the doors to potential cyber attack and even loss of data, which is equally as damaging. So I think it's a fine balance between what we automate, what we improve, where we create efficiencies, and how we maintain that check and test, the balancing act that we have currently, to ensure that we do what we say we're going to do and we do it in the best possible way.
Okay, thanks. There's another question in the Q&A to you, Jonathan, which is considering reputational risk, should yachting be more selective on owners and charter clients, or is yachting open to everyone and every client profile? And I guess the bigger question here is, you've got to be careful with the kind of clients you take on board, which is a challenge for all professionals. I suppose it's like, what's the Russia issue has highlighted that as a risk for professionals. What's your take on the sort of clients you can look after, and how do you protect yourself against taking on the wrong business?
No, I think every business has a very different reputational risk appetite. And whilst my take and Trident's take on our risk appetite may be very different to any of our competitors, I don't think you can ever close the doors to the industry to a wider audience. You can never say that a select few of people are in the elite and can buy into the industry. But as a service provider, we need to at all times consider why the individual's purchasing, what their rationale is, and what their wealth generation looks like, to decide whether or not that risk and whether or not we're willing to work with them. It's a personal decision. It's not something that any two companies would probably ever align on, and I think it's quite emotive at times.
Okay, thank you. We're coming towards the end of this session. There's still time for put your questions in. We've had some terrific questions over the course of the hour, so please do take the chance to ask a question. But I'm just going to come across the panel now, just talking across some of the key shows of 2022. Jonathan, you're just back from the Dubai Yacht Show. Perhaps you could share with the audience a sense of what the atmosphere was like in Dubai. Was there anything coming out of the show that was of interest and worth sharing with the audience?
Yeah, so I think the Dubai Yacht Show, it's not to be compared with Monaco, but I suppose it's clear that the Middle Eastern market is growing massively, not only for local customers but also for international buyers who were present at the show. There's clearly a draw to a broader international audience, and it's interesting to see that the very familiar brands are at the show. For the first time, the boat show was held at the brand new marina in Dubai Harbour, which I believe is the largest marina in the Middle East. It has capacity for more than 700 berths, and some of those capable of hosting yachts up to 160 meters. So clearly, they have a very serious appetite to develop the market and to attract yachts into the region. So yeah, I mean, I think it was a very positive show. There was certainly an appetite to do more, and I'm looking forward to returning again next year.
Terrific. Dan, I mean, we've all done a lot of this kind of conversation over the last 2 years, and now a lot of the attendance at shows, conferences, and events is all up across the board. Are there any shows you're looking forward to going to this year, and what do you think those shows will tell us or reveal about the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone obviously looks forward to the Monaco Yacht Show. I'll probably leave that for another panelist to discuss how it was last year. I also thought it was good. But for me, the first show, I say the first show of the year, the show I used to go to, used to really like, was the MIBA Charter Show in Barcelona. And I felt that the difference between Monaco and the MIBA show is, at the Monaco show, it's usually hustle and bustle. Businesses don't really have time to speak to you too often. Whereas the MIBA show, it was a really good opportunity for us to speak to like-minded businesses and understand how the winter had been, and sort of you pick up the trends about, this is happening, that's happening. So I always found it was a good show to get a feel for where things are going for that particular season, and it led on to all the other shows, obviously Parma and the various shows throughout the season.
Okay, fantastic. Marianne, what is it that you'll be looking forward to this year? What's your experience been over the last couple of years where we've had more of a pause on these kind of activity?
Yeah, it's been strange not to go to any shows for 2 years. So last year we went to the Monaco show, which was definitely probably, I would say, one of the best Monaco shows I've been to, because we had the time to see the people. There were less people. It was more quality than quantity. And actually the feedback and the trend seen during the show, everyone had the same feeling that a lot of business got done in a much more subtle way. So not usually people are very rushed in Monaco, and it's like no one has time to see anybody because everyone tries to cram in their schedule to see everybody in 4 days, as opposed to here there was more time, and there was also, because of security measures, there was more distance, there was more space. It felt incredibly good. Also the price might have done that as well. I'm not entirely sure about that though.
Terrific, thank you. Well, and Dom, you're back out on the road at the moment. You've got more trips planned. What's in your schedule for this year? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping more things will crop up. I think certainly my sort of mantra this year is, as long as we can, we will go and see people. It's been good to do webinars and watch webinars over the last couple of years, and I actually there's a really good place for these to continue, indefinitely. You can reach an audience without the expenditure of people having to move around, but there's still nothing quite like, as well, going to events, meeting people. So I think we're looking to reach out just on a kind of a private basis to some of our yard friends and contacts, and it's something we'd planned to do before the pandemic. Get out to our key client build locations and just sort of keep those relationships, rebuild to an extent those relationships that were that much more, I suppose, in your face before the pandemic and get back to that familiarity with people that we've worked with. In terms of shows, I think most people don't want to see too many lawyers at too many shows. So we'll go to Monaco. We really enjoyed Monaco last year. I echo everything that Marianne said. The right people were there. Yes, it will never economically recover from the ticket prices, I don't think, but that's aside, it was great. We met a lot of good people, refreshed relationships with a lot of good people. And also it was a great opportunity to finally, I went to Nice as well, Cannes last year as well, briefly. And it was a great opportunity to meet sort of cyber contacts from the 2 years of the pandemic. Finally, I was sort of messaging them, emailing them, going, I'm going to be in Cannes, I'm going to be in Monaco. And I met tons of people that I felt like I knew, but actually I'd never met for 2 years or so because we'd not been able to. So I think that there was a real enthusiasm for meeting people. We're keen to get out and whether it's in a private capacity or at, probably maybe Cannes, maybe Monaco, well, definitely Monaco, and just get out there and see people. And yeah, we came back with new work this year, which is always a positive from a yacht show for a lawyer. So we'll hope for the same this year.
Terrific. We just got one more question in the Q&A, which I will ask just before we close the session, from Christina Economou from Cyprus. Hello, Christina. Social media is definitely part of our lives, but ultra high net worth clients like privacy. How do you manage between captains, managers and crew the challenges of social media? A big question, but let's just try and get a distilled answer. Perhaps, Marianne, do you have a thought here, a comment as we come towards the end of this session, but on an important topic? No particular comment.
Well, there is a lot to be said, Annie. Don't know where to start. No, I think it's really important to pass on the message to the entire industry that I think the outlook on the future is by far brighter than what we've seen in the last few years. I think there is a new trend of new energy with a young generation who have great ideas. I'm all for, and I'm pushing for training everywhere I possibly can, because I can only think that that's how people grow into a different dimension. Also educating our owners, it's everyone's business. We're all equally responsible to make them aware of what's out there, what needs to be done, and how do you keep a vessel safe and happy. I always like to come back to the same motto that some people have, happy crew, happy boat. And things will evolve as a tendency in the entire world is evolving, but I definitely have a positive outlook. And people talk about crew shortage. I don't believe in it. I think we have the tendency and a possibility to attract new people in the business. So no, I'm extremely optimistic.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Dan, do you have a comment on this question of the balance with social media and the training aspects that Marianne already highlighted?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the social media side, looking at the particular question, I used to draft employment contracts and handbooks as well, and it's one of the elements I sort of always put in there. There's always usually a social media policy on board the vessel, and it's not just for when guests are on board, it's also when guests are off as well. There might be some sort of security angle there as well. If you're taking photos of the vessel and your Facebook account's open, so you can see that, you can see the interior photos of the vessel. So I think there's quite a strict policy in place. How that's implemented by the captain on board is down to each captain to ensure it's enforced. But yeah, usually there is a policy on board that does restrict the chances of posting of yacht related pictures and content on social media.
Dan, if I may add, it's in the contract and on every vessel's board as well.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you very much. We're coming to the close of this conversation now. I just want to come back to Jonathan just for some closing thoughts or comments, Jonathan, as we wrap up this hour. We've talked across so many different subjects. We've had some brilliant questions in the chat and the Q&A. Any final reflections before we close off this session?
I think we're in a very positive place right now. The industry is clearly moving at a fast pace. Having had 2 years virtually at home, all of us, it was great to kickstart this year with a show in Dubai and to see how that interest is still there. I'm personally looking forward to the year ahead. I know it's going to be incredibly busy for myself, all my colleagues and everybody involved. I'm very positive for the future, and everybody I speak to tends to echo that sentiment as well.
Terrific. A good note to end on. Well, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you to the panel for an insightful discussion. Thank you to Trident Trust for sponsoring this session, and I wish you a very good afternoon.